Hi guys, it's Faith Young. Welcome to my What Would Faith Do YouTube channel. I'm excited today because today I want to talk about something that I have implemented and been practicing for a couple years of my life. I call it not being attached to the outcome. I believe often, especially in my past, that I would have expectations, and you would meet somebody and you'd say, "Oh, I expect it to be like this." And what I've discovered from that is that might be actually setting it up for failure instead of setting it up for success. So one thing that I've shifted is not being attached to the outcome. I implement that in my business, I implement that in my life, and it's just a great way for me to create space for more than what's really there. Because if you have expectations, it could be a limitation. Because the words I like to use is, this is going to be bigger than I can imagine, or this is going to turn out better than I can imagine. Are the words that I like to use instead of, oh, it better be this way, or I better get this. Because who are we to say that we better have something? I think that's a form of entitlement, and entitlement, I believe, comes directly out of coming from scarcity. So when you come from abundance and you literally realize that every day the divine is working in our favor. Some days it might not feel like that, and it might feel like everything's come crashing down and you're having these rough days and nothing's coming together. But in reality, everything is always coming together. It just might not feel like that at the time. So for example, I'll put it in real simple terms. So if you meet someone and you're going to go out on a date, right? And you as the female says, okay, he better buy dinner and he better open the door and so on and so forth. That's an expectation, right? And if he doesn't buy dinner and he makes you pay for half of the dinner, you're already disappointed. Like, it's set it up for failure. And not saying that there is anything right or wrong about paying for dinner, but I'm just saying is, what if you could instead said, hey, this date's going to be really fun tonight, right? Instead of saying what that fun looks like, how it should turn out, and what expectations you have. Because what if instead of saying he better pay for dinner, what if he does something so magical and like swoops you up off the street on a horse carriage ride, right? That you were so focused on dinner, right, that you wasn't even thinking there could be something better than that. So often the mathematical equation I like to describe being attached to the outcome is people are attached to A plus B equals C. And they're so focused on C, right? They want C so incredibly bad that I believe, what if the universe had Z in store for you, but you were so focused on the C that Z never even had an opportunity to show up because you didn't create space for something bigger than you can possibly imagine right now, or even think you deserve or can receive at this moment. So that mathematical equation is those people who are constantly saying, well, how is it going to turn out better than I can imagine? Or why isn't he doing this? So on and so forth. The people who are focused on the how and the why tend to be stuck in that mathematical equation, right? But this is the universe that there's a lot more mathematical equations than just A plus B equals C. So practicing not being attached to the outcome has been amazing in my life. It has shifted things and attracted things into my life that previously I wouldn't even known were possible. So one of the greatest stories that I have about that, well, there's several, but one that comes to mind is I had a girlfriend of mine, a really good friend of mine, and her mom was renting, and her mom was renting for a long time. And she's like, Mom, you need to buy a house. I'm tired of you renting. You should go buy. And her mom's like, I can't buy a house. What are you talking about? She goes, just go talk to Faith. Go talk to Faith. So we did. She took the leap of faith, and she called me, and I called her, and we got together, and we started putting the loan process together, and next thing I know, we're out looking for houses. And yes, we had to put in several offers to find her the right house, but we found her the perfect place. And I remember at the walkthrough when you go to a walkthrough right before closing to make sure the house is how it was when you originally saw it. And we're doing the walkthrough. She's so cute. She wanted me to help her pick out the paint colors in the house. And so we drew a little map of the entire house, and we're like, okay, paint color number 1 goes here, paint number 2 goes here, so on and so forth. So about a week after closing, I call her, my client, and I'm like, Sandy, how did it go? How's your new place? How's the paint colors in your new home? And she says to me, Faith, who would have thought someone who makes $12 an hour could own their own home? So that's a beautiful example of not being attached to the outcome. Like at first she's like, yeah, right, I can't buy a house, this is impossible. But for some reason, she believed in her daughter so much that she at least called. And we created something so magical. So the second part of this particular client is so cool because here it is 2 years later, and she wanted to buy a car, pay cash for a car, and we kind of looked at her house and realized that she had over $100,000 in equity in only 2 years. So talk about not being attached to the outcome, right? So she's renting for 7 to 10 years. All of a sudden now she buys, and now she has all this money in equity. So she ends up putting it on the market, and we were trying to find her a replacement property, and because of her job, she was paid half commission. She could only find a certain amount of house. And then all of a sudden, while we're on the market, she gets laid off. And here I am not being attached to the outcome, and I call her and I said, hey, you know what? I get it. If you want to take your property off the market, I totally understand. If you want to keep it on the market, let me know. Either way, whatever's best for you. So sure enough, she said, okay, let's just write it out for the weekend. Sure enough, the next day, we receive an offer. And I let her think about it, and then she calls and says, you know what, Faith? I'm not sure if I can pay my mortgage next month. Let's go ahead and sell. And so we did, and she got over $100,000 at the closing, which is, for someone who made $12 an hour a couple years ago, this is huge. This is a gift she probably would have never imagined possible. And not being attached to the outcome, it was, I reminded her, I was like, well, what if you could find another job that paid you the same amount of money, but you could buy a bigger house now? And a few weeks ago, she called me and said, Faith, she's like, I'm so excited. She goes, I just got offered a job, and I told him how much I wanted to make, and he paid me that exact amount. Her words were, who would have thought that I could ask for the value I'm worth? And that, believe me, is way more than $12 an hour that she's getting paid at her new job. So now we can find her perfect home. And it's so beautiful to see that as an example of not being attached to the outcome. Because if either one of us were like, it has to look like this, and it has to feel like this, and I have to move in by, March 1st, then we would have had maybe some disappointments along the way. But instead, it's like magic. It's created something so big in her life that she sees her value for the first time maybe in her entire life. And it's magical to be a part of that and to help people realize that not being attached to the outcome can actually attract more abundance, more love into your life. So start practicing that. The next time you find yourself, when you have a client, you're meeting a client and you're like, well, they better use me or they better hire me. Really step back and take a moment and say, wait a minute, who am I to say they better hire me? That's a gift just going to the appointment to meet with them, to interview for the job. So instead, think about, how can this turn out bigger than I can imagine? And for example, a friend of mine, Don Jackson, I talk about his story in my book. He was on unemployment and he was having a hard time and he was struggling, and he's like, Faith, can you kind of give me some ideas on how to get through this? And we talked about creating something that wasn't possible, that he could see within his range. And I said, well, you know what? The interview will be there. What if you go home tonight and there's an interview, waiting for you in your email? He's like, yeah, okay. So he got on board and he could feel it and he could picture it. And, you know, sure enough, shortly later, he calls and says, I got the email. I am getting the interview. The interview's tomorrow. That was, you know, it's so amazing how it works. And I said, okay, well, not be attached to the outcome when it comes to what that looks like when you go in for the interview. So he calls me later and says, okay, Faith, guess what? I need your help. I'm going on my second interview tomorrow. And I said, how awesome is that? And he goes, yeah, it's so cool. I need your help to help manifest more during that. And I said, okay, well, how much are they planning on paying you? And he said $95 an hour, which was a significant amount of money for him. And I said, how cool is that? I said, what if they paid you another $10 more than that? Right? Like, instead of just going in and expecting this outcome, what if it could be bigger than that? He's like, okay, all right, just creates this energy and he can feel it and he could believe it was possible. The coolest thing happened. He calls me after his second interview and says, well, Faith, they give me a $10,000 hiring bonus. Does that count for that extra $10 an hour? Yeah, I think that does work. So what a beautiful way of not being attached to the outcome. Like, he was grateful for $95 an hour, but they gave him a $10,000 hiring bonus. And he told me, a matter of fact, the $5,000 was already in his bank account, and the second $5,000 would come on his first paycheck. So talk about turning out bigger than you can imagine, not being attached to the outcome or expecting to get the job and they better pay me this amount. Instead, it created space for something bigger, and he was able to attract even more abundance as a result. And it's been so beautiful to see how people can implement this in their own life and practice not being attached to the outcome. So the next time you're focused on C, think about, what if the universe has Z in store for me? And just create space, you know, create space for you, create space for people who are around you, for something bigger to happen. And, you know, stop focusing on the outcome and start focusing on your intention. And your intention is whatever your intention is for you, for your business, for your life. Like I said earlier, my intention is to make a positive impact in people's lives. So that's my intention every day. And when that opportunity comes up every day, it's magical. It's not entitled to me by any means. It's a gift. And I believe when you see life as a gift, gifts keep showing up. So consider that the next time you're so focused on something having to turn out the way you want it to maybe surrender to that and not be attached to the outcome. Thanks for tuning in today.